This episode is sponsored by the Expert Services Directory. Are you a coach, consultant, speaker, or trainer who wants to sell your services to corporate clients across the UK, but you're booking fewer than 5 qualified sales calls from your lead generation each month? Or finding that all of your inbound inquiries are coming from junior employees in firms who just want to benchmark your pricing rather than actually introduce you to the real decision maker who has the buying power to get you in? And you really want to generate real qualified inbound inquiries from decision makers in organisations around the UK who actually have buying power and want to purchase your services as an external supplier? Well, that is exactly what the Expert Services Directory is for. And if you visit www.expertservicesdirectory.com and sign up now, you can generate qualified corporate leads for 12 whole months by being part of the Expert Services Directory, where we proactively market specialist providers just like you to real decision makers in companies across the UK who are ready to buy from external suppliers. And if you use the code podcast at checkout, all caps, you'll also get a free corporate priorities calendar that you can use to understand exactly what decision makers are prioritizing at each point in the year so that you can create solutions that sell all year round as well. All you have to do is visit www.expertservicesdirectory.com and enter the code podcast, all in capital letters, at the checkout now. Right, let's get back to the episode. Welcome to the Selling to Corporate podcast, where we're going to be challenging your sales beliefs around selling to corporate organizations and help you increase your bottom line profits every single month. I am Jessica Lorimer, your sales expert and guide in this world of selling to corporate companies, skyrocketing your company sales and making the impact that you really want in the world. Now, don't forget, if you do enjoy the show today, please do head over to iTunes and leave us a review. But enjoy this episode, and I am really looking forward to sharing some epic sales wisdom with you. It feels like it's been a while since I picked up the microphone, and it has and it hasn't. A lot has moved forward in my life over the last month or so, and maybe that's why it feels like time is flying past for me. But it may feel completely different to you. But as it happens, I'll catch you up a little bit, because I think that there will be some of you who read a newsletter that I popped out last week that might have some questions around how things are going. So firstly, if you are not on the newsletter list and you don't receive the newsletter on a Wednesday and a Friday, email me or, drop me a message on LinkedIn. Email will probably get a quicker response, but, whatever method you want, because actually I produce a really, I think, interesting and useful sales newsletter every week that gives you sales tips, techniques, tricks, things that you can use to focus on revenue generating activities in your business. And it is a really, really good way of focusing on the right activities to do and that are going to move the revenue needle in your business, but B, also giving you that kind of, friendly reminder a couple of times a week that whatever else you're busy with, it's also good to be busy with sales activity. So if you're somebody who has found that your motivation and your accountability has maybe been a little low, drop me a line, get yourself onto the newsletter list, get yourself a little, a pep up a couple of times a week just to make sure that you're actually doing the right things for your business. It's interesting because in March, which is where we are now, I cannot believe it. But in March, we are moving over to a new newsletter platform. Very excited. Also quite stressed about the amount of technical changes that need to happen. In March, we're moving across to a new newsletter platform and we are going to be rebranding the newsletter. So very, very exciting. To working title is called the B2B Sales Edit. And it's going to be where I can deep dive into some of the trends, insights, and revenue generating strategies that I've been playing with, some of the sales communication and psychology pieces, specifically around the B2B space, that I've been working on over the last couple of years. Because whilst the podcast is phenomenal, and it is, it's also quite a mammoth task to try and get all of the depth in there, in these episodes, when really maximum length for a podcast is about 45 minutes. Whereas with the B2B sales edit, I'll be able to reference lots of things. We'll be able to have continuous conversations, and it will be a nice enhancer for those of you who listen to the podcast. So if you don't currently get our newsletter, please do email me or drop me a line on LinkedIn. I will send you the new fancy custom link for signing up. Looks very good so far. The rest of it, complete nightmare, and our tech team are having to work on, but that's why it's coming out in March and not right now. And if you already subscribe to the newsletter, then you will see over the next few weeks a button or a hyperlink in each newsletter to let you know that we are moving software. So if you do want to stay on the newsletter link and see some of these interesting, more report, insights driven style newsletters, that you can automatically sign yourself up there as well. But last week I sent out a newsletter, and it was, I've had an awful lot of responses. I'm still trying to get back to all of those responses. So if I haven't sent you a message yet, please know that it is coming. I really, really appreciate everybody who emails me back about anything, because it's nice to know that you're not shouting out into the void sometimes. And it's also nice to know that you're not alone in some of this crazy world that we call starting, running, maintaining, and growing a business. And it's actually one of the reasons that I wanted to record this episode today on that theme of not feeling isolated and using community in the best way. But I sent out a newsletter last week because I think, and I've referenced on the podcast a fair bit over the last few months, 2025 was an interesting year for me personally. Now, if you have known me for a while, if you've listened to the podcast for a while, if you've consumed literally any content that I've produced over the last 14 years that I've been running a business, you will know that I don't believe in what I call pimping your pain for profit. Now, what I mean by that is that, and it was very commonplace in 2015. So if you weren't running an online business in 2015, you probably haven't seen this, but you may recognize it from around the internet at large. I don't know. I don't spend enough time there these days. But there was a spate of marketing, and I would call it marketing gone wrongly, where people talked about very, very traumatic things that were happening to them in real time. And it was kind of like creating and cultivating the drama that a reality television show creates, where people would talk about things that were very, very painful to them or things that were happening to them in real time. And then they would try and link them in with some kind of sales message. And it was, I found, quite jarring and awkward. And so I coined this phrase, people pimping their pain for profit. Lots of people didn't like that phrase. I will say the people who didn't like it, generally the ones who were doing it. So I didn't have so much of a problem, but we are where we are. Anyway, 2025 was interesting for me on a personal level, and I've referenced that a few times. And the reason that I haven't really ever talked about what exactly was happening was because I just wasn't ready to. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think sometimes when we run a business, particularly one where it's focused around what we are all calling a personal brand now, but essentially what is people-based businesses, we feel like we owe people. We owe communities and audiences to bare our souls when we might not want to yet, or when it might not actually feel relevant to. And I spent a good 6 months just feeling like, yeah, okay, cool. There are lots of things on a personal front that I'm finding challenging at the moment, but work is my haven. Work is my peace. Work is my joy. And I didn't really want to mess up that peace, that haven, that joy with I don't know, awkward updates about, oh gosh, here's this thing in life that I'm finding not tough, but here's this thing that I'm experiencing in real time that I am still trying to process, but let me share it with you because that will help me be more, I don't know, authentic. Anyway, obviously I didn't do that. Um, I spent a lot of time focusing on activities that would consistently generate me revenue in my business. I dialed down on the core activities that were going to be easiest for me to execute. And I focused on what I would call being relentlessly consistent with what I could manage around the things that were happening. And the things that were happening are things that happen to everyone at different phases of their life. It just felt like last year they all kind of happened to me at once. So, we experienced a really significant family bereavement. My mother-in-law passed away unexpectedly, um, in a traumatic way for my husband, for his family. I would say for me, but obviously much more for them because it was his mum. Um, and that was really difficult because whilst I've experienced grief before, I've never experienced supporting a partner through a significant period of grief. And that was tough. And we bought a house at the same time that it was supposed to be our forever house, that is our forever house, that we're really excited about, that we loved when we walked in and saw it. And then we moved into it and decorated it and realized that actually it had a lot of renovation that needed to happen, way more than we could ever have expected. And we ended up getting into situations with our surveyors who hadn't mentioned quite a lot of critical problems that the house would have. And, you know, that along with significant bereavement took kind of a shine off off the move. And I ended up selling my flat where I started my first business. And I realized that this sounds like very first world problems. Um, but for me, that was a big deal because it was one of the only places that had ever been just mine. And the kind of closure of saying, okay, well, I don't have this place anymore that is so intrinsically linked to my business and joy at a specific part of my life. That was hard to say goodbye to for me. And then, of course, at the end of the year, I was raced to hospital on the fast track for the cancer pathway because doctors thought that I had quite a rare form of oral cancer. And I then went through the requisite tests for that kind of thing. So biopsies and the inevitable wait, 5 weeks that it takes for biopsy results to come back. And I was really fortunate because I don't have cancer. And then I spent a good while figuring out how I wanted to process that really, because I'd spent a good couple of months thinking, oh my gosh, well, what if I do have this thing? How will I run my business? What will happen? And extrapolating things to the nth degree. And I'm sure that in and amongst the people who listen to this podcast, there are people who are listening to this probably thinking, yeah, no, I've done that. Or I've experienced that, whether it's a house move and renovations where you've bitten off more than you could chew, or a medical thing that came out of the blue, or a family bereavement, or something that just knocked the wind out your sails a bit. And for me, the kind of preceding 6 months to where we are now, it all just kept happening. But work also kept happening. And work was, like I say, my joy. Because there is one thing in my life that I'm really good at. Well, two, I guess. One is selling, and specifically B2B sales. So my corporate client list grew. And that was because I had this relentless focus and consistency around what sales activities do I need to be doing, and just doing those. Even when I was like, oh gosh, I've got 2 hours this week because everything else has gone to pot. What can I do? let me see what I can manage in that 2 hours. What revenue generating activities can I do? So, sales, I'm good at. Delivery of sales, coaching, training, consultancy, etc. I'm also very good at. So, the clients that I was taking on are really happy and were really happy that I was delivering things because I was doing really well. And that became my joy for, this 6 months. And life is starting, I say, as I touch all of the wood, to even out a little bit. But I thought I would let you know, because I think, one, a podcast is a weirdly, I don't know, a weirdly intimate conversation because even though we're not talking, I feel like we're friends. So I was like, oh well, you know. And two is because now that things are slowing down a little bit, I can talk about those things without the rawness that I was experiencing last year. And there are really valuable sales lessons that have come from that. One of them is just consistency, just that nice reminder that, going all or nothing on sales activities all the time is just pointless because you can go all or nothing and have grand plans and, what is it they say? From your mouth to God's ears, right? Or you have plans and God laughs, something like that. And, you might not be a God person, you might be the universe or some other form of spirituality, totally fine. But I feel like now that I'm on the other side, I have reminded myself that relentless consistency is way more important than making grand announcements about going all in and then actually only doing 2 stages of the sales process and realizing you're burnt out and overwhelmed and you can't do anything. So that lesson, very, very welcome, very exciting. There are other things that I've learned from it. And, some of that is around how I can plan differently in my business. Because when you are looking at a diagnosis like that, you start to think about what is important and what do I need to do and what is a priority and what isn't. And so there are things that I want to do and explore and change about my business, but also things that I want to do and explore and change in my life. And that's really exciting. So on the other side of all of this, I don't know, some people would say turmoil, but I kind of feel like speed bumps is a good expression. On the other side of all these speed bumps that have been going on, I feel excited and positive and grateful. And I also feel like it gives me room to have a little pause and think about what is really important to do next. And it also brought up the conversation that we're having today, which is much more important than the life update I've just given you. So during all of this stuff happening, I'm really fortunate. I have a really good group of peers who, some of them run businesses, some of them are working in organizations where they are leaders within those organizations. Some of them are people that I've just known for a very, very long time, but I would call them all part of my peer support network. And I'd have different conversations with all of them. With some of my friends who've experienced loss, I'd talk about, bereavement. And with some of my friends who have experienced health challenges of their own, I would talk about the ways that people navigate that. And with my business friends, the ones who run businesses, we talk about things like the market. We talk about, what the landscape looked like. We would talk about what the economical landscape looked like, what the political landscape was doing to businesses around the world, how things were moving. And it was really, really interesting because I realized that I had these, I don't know, 3 groups, if you like, of people that I would talk to about quite different things. And what was most interesting to me on reflection, by the way, I didn't think about this in the moment. This isn't one of those motivational LinkedIn posts where you're like, oh, my life was up and down, and here's what I learned. But what was interesting on reflection was that when I was having conversations with my business peers who are all eminently successful in their own fields, and they run a combination of businesses. Some of them run online businesses, where they are delivering digital courses and programs and masterminds, the things that you will have definitely seen on Facebook adverts when you first started your business. Some of them are running what I would call real life businesses. So a couple of my friends run recruitment agencies or estate agent companies or bars and shops and things like that. But what was really interesting was that none of them tried to give me any advice on running my business during these times. A lot of them talked about some of the difficulties that I might face based on their own experience. They were like, oh, well, you're going to need to take more time off, or you're going to need to systemize things a bit differently. But none of them were like, hey, Jess, let me give you some advice on growing your business or generating revenue in your business at this time. And that was interesting for me because I was like, well, I wonder why they're not. And then I realized, I was like, well, actually, I'm the expert at that. So that's probably why. Instead, they were giving me useful sat nav guidance on things that I might expect to come up. They weren't telling me, hey, you should go and, I don't know, use this particular CRM system because that's going to make it easier when you're moving house to manage your business. They were saying, hey, look, when I moved house, it was really tricky. I'd recommend having more content than you think you need when you're batching because it will just make your life a lot easier. And that's what I think is the interesting starter to this discussion, really. Because I believe, contrary to the title of this episode, it might seem a bit different. I believe that having peer support is invaluable. Over the last 6 years alone, I've run the C-suite, and the community inside that has always been phenomenal. And I believe that having a peer network who genuinely understand what you're trying to achieve, understand why you're doing the things that you do, understand how to help you stay accountable to your goals, and who can help challenge you in those moments where you're having those mindset wobbles around, can I really do this? And who can motivate you to take action even when you don't really want to. I think that is invaluable. I really do. And over the last 6 months, I've been blessed with that, with those people who are like, oh, yeah, I know you're really tired right now, but I definitely recommend, get a couple of extra podcast episodes in the bank because it's going to give you that free time later on. Or people who've been like, oh gosh, yeah, sometimes everything in life feels like it's punching you in the face. Yeah, that's that is going to happen. But remember, it will look different in a few weeks, or it will look different when this happens. I think that that is one of the best things that you can ever get as a business owner, because creating a business is isolating, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because especially when you grow an online business, nobody really gets it. Like your friends and your family, they really are proud of you and they want to understand what you do and all that kind of stuff, but they don't get it. And that's why having that peer support, that peer network who understand what you're trying to do and can help you stay motivated and accountable to taking action on a weekly or monthly basis, absolutely brilliant. But recently, I've seen a different trend. And I think it's to do with the economy, if I'm honest. I've been talking about this for a couple of years in the podcast, but with everything changing from a political and economic standpoint, and certainly from a humanitarian standpoint as well, there has been this change, significant change in the amount of disposable income that people have. And that means that people are developing what I would call an over-reliance on peer support networks and expecting more from their peer support network than that peer support network is able to give. And I want to dig into this because I think it's really important. This is, we're in this economy where, like I say, disposable income is being squeezed. In every country around the world, governments are having to make difficult financial decisions and nobody is happy with the outcomes. Believe me, nobody is happy with the outcomes, right? But it also means that when people are thinking about where do I spend my disposable income, it raises bigger questions for them, because when we are making investments into ourselves or our businesses, we always have stuff that comes up anyway, money stuff. Am I really going to spend this on this course when my partner wants to go on holiday or my kids want to go on a school trip or, whatever else? I think there's always a lot of guilt around investment in self. And that's before the economy changed. As disposable income gets less, there's also then this almost fear. What if I make the wrong investment? And people have been making the wrong investments for, ever, but specifically in the online space for a very long time. And that's because people have historically made investments based on the popularity and the marketing of the person selling the program or the course or the mastermind or the retreat or the whatever, rather than doing the investing based on the boring corporate metrics around troubleshooting the data. What in my business is working and producing the output it's supposed to, and what in my business is not working or producing the output it's supposed to. And am I actually investing in the thing that is going to help me get the outcome that I want from the activity that is supposed to produce it? Or am I just buying the next thing so that I can be in front of a load of other people and have my photo taken with influential people who can maybe give me more visibility and exposure and da 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 da, right? We've all heard it before. So in this landscape where it's tough because every financial decision matters and we want to get it right and, we want to make sure that we're making worthwhile investments, people are often putting it off. And that means that they are developing, like I say, this over-reliance on peer support networks. Now, what do I actually mean by over-reliance? Because can you really be too reliant on a peer support group? Well, the differentiation for me is in 3 areas. And again, I will caveat this all by saying I genuinely believe that having a peer support network is invaluable when building a business. I also believe that people are expecting more from their peer support networks than that kind of environment is able to provide. And so the first thing that I see that is problematic about developing an over-reliance on a peer support network is when people start using their peers for advice, strategic guidance on their business, rather than what a peer support network is designed to be, which is accountability, motivation, referrals. Accountability isn't the same as advisory. And I really want you to hear that message. Peer support at its core is best when it is about accountability. Hey, you said you were going to send 10 emails this week, did you? Hey, you said you were going to go to 2 networking events this month, did you? That is not the same as strategic guidance and support from experts. And that is a really big problem that we're seeing in this over-reliance of peer support networks, because it brings us into 3 difficult and grey areas. The first being that we have to actually decide what we want from our peer support network, but also what they're able to give. If we're saying we want accountability and the occasional, like my peer support group do for me, sharing the occasional challenge or swapping stories about what that might look like, then great, as long as that's what you're doing and using it for, and also that it's being used for. But if it's for free advice on business building, actually, that's quite a bad and dangerous idea. Because when we're asking our peers for free business building or revenue growth or any other kind of strategic guidance and advice, A, if they happen to be the expert in that area, we're not paying them. And that's not great, because if we are saying that we believe in paying experts, we absolutely should be paying our friends when they're the experts. But B, perhaps more worryingly, is that if your peers are not the specialists in those areas, they can only give you advice based on their own experience, that they might not actually be qualified to troubleshoot thoroughly, and that they might not actually be qualified to give to you. So, for example, I've seen over the years lots of people who've gone through my programs. They've created these really nice peer support networks where they've stayed accountable to doing things like business development. And they'll be like, oh, we're going to set up business development co-working sessions once every 2 weeks or whatever. And I think that's great. If, though, somebody came to me and said, hey, Jess, I've been doing co-working sessions with this group for a year, and someone in the group advised that they were doing this kind of strategy, so I've been trying it and it's not working for me, so obviously that strategy doesn't work, I would be going, whoa, hang on a minute. Actually, there's a reason that this person's using this strategy, and this is why it will work for them, and this is why it will benefit their business. But here are all the reasons that I would never have recommended it as the expert for you to use. Because here are all the reasons that actually it would be much more difficult for you, or that it wouldn't work in the same way, or that it would take more time, or that it would need more of, these pieces to make the puzzle fit. So we have to be really careful about what we're actually asking from our peer network versus what we want from a peer network. And like I say, accountability is absolutely fine. Motivation to do the thing, absolutely fine. Like I referenced earlier, my friend saying to me, oh yeah, well, I'd recommend batching some extra bits because when I moved house, bit of a nightmare. Absolutely fine. But if you're trying to use your accountability network to be your strategic advisory and guidance system, that will lead to problems because they might not be focusing on the same things as you. And that can be problematic. They might not be qualified to give you that advice, which might mean that it'd go wrong. They might not be able to help you troubleshoot that advice because if they didn't experience the same problems that you experience with the strategy, they won't be able to help you through it. The second thing that becomes problematic when we use this kind of accountability network as an advisory one is that your peers will often bring their own fears to your world rather than an objective advisor or consultant or coach or whoever it is that you're hiring who is specifically there to walk you through all of the options without bias. Their job is to help you make the right decisions for your business based on the data, rather than your peer group who may make decisions based on how they feel or how confident they feel about specific strategies. Okay? Your peer group are limited to what has worked for them or what is working for them, and that's unlikely to be the same for you. And I'm not saying that, your peer group are terrible at giving advice. I'm really, really not. What I am saying, though, is that, and I see it all the time in programs that I've run where people will come to learning sessions or hot seats or in-person days or anything else where they can talk about their specific business and their specific needs. And everyone, myself included, has their own fears or feelings about things. And so the risk you have when you're taking advice and strategic guidance from somebody who is not an objective advisor. So, meaning they haven't been paid specifically by you to look at your business and your situation and your data and help you make decisions based on those things. Your peers are bringing in their own feelings. Oh, I used LinkedIn once and it didn't work for me, so I wouldn't rate it. Or, oh yeah, I did email outreach a bit, but I got some responses that were really, really horrible. So I think it's awful. It will really destroy your confidence, you know. Or worse, people who say, I used to work in that role. I was in HR in a company once and I never would have responded to those kinds of emails or calls or LinkedIn messages or whatever you're using because it just was really spammy and I didn't like it. We've all heard versions of this. That is that person's feeling on how they are doing something or what they have experienced previously. It's not actually fact, it's not actually strategy, it's not strategic guidance based on data and statistics, it's based on how they feel about something. Having feelings is not a bad thing. Absolutely, your peers should have feelings. It means that they're human, not robots. But when it comes to growing your business, you have to be growing your business based on what's best for it. What's best for your sales strategy based on your data, based on what you are able to do, based on what you're confident with, based on what time you have available, based on your capacity, based on your ability, not how somebody else feels about the activity that you're going to embark on or that you're considering. So that's important. And then finally, the other piece that becomes problematic around accountability versus advisory is the idea of fairness in the relationship. I don't know whether anyone else has ever watched the film Friends with Benefits. It's from the early noughties. It has Justin Timberlake in it. A lot of you probably will not have watched it, but they usually bring it out around Christmas. It's like a rom-com. Anyway, you will all know from the title what it's about. But there's a saying in it where they talk about the fact that, friends with benefits is a bad idea because one person will always be more attached than the other. And I think that this happens in peer support networks too, only in a slightly different way. One person in a peer support network will always get more out of it than everybody else. That's not inherently a problem. And it's great for that person. And it can actually be great for other people to know that they are giving support and advice and, guidance to people who are just starting out in that kind of mentorship type way. However, it can also be really difficult to consistently be the smartest person in the room or the person who feels like they're giving the most. The person who feels like they're always organizing the co-working, or the person who feels like they're always the one giving out the referrals, or the person who feels like they're always the one sharing tips and advice, but not ever getting it back, or certainly not to the degree that they're putting it in. That becomes really hard. And sometimes that can actually break down friendships and things. And that is sad. That can be really, really difficult because it can increase those feelings of isolation in building a business, particularly if you're the person who inadvertently was getting more out of the relationship than the other peer and you don't really know what went wrong. Suddenly that person might not take your calls as often and suddenly they won't want to give you the advice and you don't necessarily know what happened because it's always been fine before and suddenly isn't. That can be really tough to navigate. Now, again, the whole point of this episode is absolutely not to bash peer support networks. I think they're incredibly valuable. I encourage them in my communities. Even in this current cohort of the C-suite, we've got a buddy system and it's brilliant. But what I will say, and the overarching message from this episode, really is to know what you're using your peer support network for. They shouldn't be a replacement for strategic advice and guidance, particularly in your sales strategy, unless they're a sales expert, you know, or in any of your business strategy, unless they're a business expert and they've got that specialist area of expertise. Because it's not the same as going for a drink with your friends after work and talking about your personal life and kind of, I don't know, me and my friends. Well, actually, no, I would say both of my sets of friends, men and women, they always want to talk about what's going on in life, and they've got very, very different perspectives um, on things that might be happening in life. But that's like a chin wag between friends on a topic. We might talk about, oh, this is what my partner got me for Valentine's Day. What do you think? Or, oh my gosh, we've just had our bathroom done and these are the coat hooks that somebody bought to put on the back of the door. Yes, that is definitely a story that I've shared with my friends. How sad am I? um, but it's those kinds of things, and they don't have the same weight that the future of your business does for you. So just be mindful about that. And if nothing else, remember accountability and having accountability and motivation from your peers is wonderful, but it's absolutely not the same as advisory. And it shouldn't be used as such. All right. As always, remember that this episode has been sponsored by the Expert Services Directory, which is super exciting because it is growing. And actually, funnily enough, met up with a friend of mine 2 days ago, and she said to me, Jess, I have been on your Expert Services Directory and I've seen this supplier. And I was like, oh, have you? And she was like, yeah. And I was just wondering whether you wanted to refer me or whether I could actually submit in the contact box. And I was like, well, I think you should submit in the contact box because that is what this call to action is. And so she did. So if you are that supplier and you are listening to the podcast episode, you will know who you are because I watched her send the email and also made her put that we were sat there doing it because it was exciting. But I do promise you that she had actually found you before we had the chat anyway on the Expert Services Directory. And it's all very, very exciting. So if you are somebody who is a coach, a consultant or service provider, and you are looking to generate more inbound qualified leads into your business because you want more sales from corporate clients, then please make sure that you go across to the Expert Services Directory and get yourself signed up as a listee. We've actually got a free training coming for listees in April, where I will be going through some of the best ways that you can adapt your profile to help you get more views based on what we are learning and have learned over the last few months, watching decision makers navigate the Expert Services Directory and go back and get feedback from our decision maker user groups and all of that stuff as well. So we will be doing a free training session on that in April. So if you are part of the Expert Services Directory, you'll be getting an email later on this week. I say that realizing that you don't know when I'm recording this, but later on this week, you'll get an email about that free training session. And of course, if you sign up to the Expert Services Directory, you will also get to be part of that training session as well. I will see you in the next episode. Have an excellent week. And make sure, again, that if you are not currently signed up to our newsletter, that you drop me a little email because we will get you on that brand new list for the B2B Sales Edit coming soon.